Hello, my name is Lucas. This is a bit of lit, and it is day 20 of Vlogmas, and it's time to talk about The Stranger by Albert Camus. It is a reread for me. Earlier this year, I read The Plague by Albert Camus, which I think is an excellent book. Personally, I really enjoy it. It's about a plague in Oran, Algeria, that shuts things down, and how people respond to that, and how people respond to how life has changed, and the restrictions, and all these kinds of things. But really, it's about Nazi occupation. I've also read The Myth of Sisyphus and other essays, and it's philosophizing on the absurdities in life, and I've read this twice. It's been a couple years since I've read it, and I didn't remember it too well. I actually remembered the main points, which I will get into momentarily, but some of the smaller points, I didn't really understand the book when I read it before. Now I understand it better, but I don't really understand the appeal. This appealed to me when I read it when I was younger, but now I think The Plague is much better because I guess the way it focuses on the absurd in The Plague and how you respond to it, I prefer that to the way Rousseau responds to the absurd. I mean, in a way, he's suffering from the same plague, sort of, in a philosophical way, I suppose. The plague of the absurd, right? And, what's the meaning of life? And, these kind of questions and existential ideas. It's like there's this moment somewhere in a scene where they're in a courthouse, and Rousseau is thinking about how people need things to run smoothly, and it's sort of part of the trade, part of the game in a sense, and it's like it's not even that he rejects these things. I mean, he does, I suppose, but it's like he doesn't even engage with it. He can't accept it, and he won't accept it, but it's like he can't even reject it. He just wants nothing to do with it because he has no interest. He has no connection to anybody, which makes him the stranger. And in a way, it's very difficult to read because he has no empathy for anybody. He has no remorse for any of his actions throughout his entire life. And, he's just not a good guy in any way. But you come to understand him and why he thinks like this, how he thinks like this, and what it would be like to think like this. So in that sense, it can be interesting to read. However, not the most pleasant experience in terms of reading. I'm not looking for like people I can like because they're just characters, but it is difficult, especially knowing that there are people like this, maybe not with the same existential philosophy, but there are people that are as callous as Rousseau acts, but they, I was gonna say Rousseau, it's like, it doesn't seem like he's trying to be callous, it's just the way he is, and it's a horrible flaw, and I would hate to know somebody like this, but, other people like him, it's like, they enjoy it. That's all I'm gonna say. But anyway, the classic opening, Maman died today, or was it yesterday? I can't be sure. Something along those lines. He goes to settle affairs with his mother, who has passed away, And when he's, at the funeral home, whatever, talking to people, people get a little bit upset with him and are confused and sort of disgusted with him all throughout. Because, I mean, even early on, he has no interest in seeing his mother. He doesn't seem to even really know much about her, or even how old she is. He would rather just smoke a cigarette and drink coffee. And I mean, he does this kind of thing to everybody. When he reacts to people, when he does something and people react to the way he acts, he's almost confused every single time by their reaction to him. Like, he really doesn't seem to understand them. He's got a couple of friends, Marie, who he has met from work and has a bit of an affair with the next day. Raymond, who he helps write a letter so that Raymond can get revenge on his Moorish girlfriend. He wants to get carnal and spit in her face to get revenge because he's a psychopath. And Rousseau sees nothing wrong with this. He doesn't think it's a good thing. He seems to agree with the logic of what Raymond is saying. So in that sense, just in a logical way, he doesn't seem to think it's the moral thing to do. Just logically, yeah, I mean, if that's what she did, I suppose. This is why I don't really like him. He has no empathy, does not seem to care, has no connection to anyone. And it's uncomfortable. Of course, there's another guy that's like his neighbor who has a dog, who tells him that people said a lot of bad things about him for putting his mom basically in a nursing home. And again, he says some things, and he is always surprised by the way people respond to him. There's even a moment, like, early on at the home, where he's observing these elderly people, and all these women apparently are really fat, and he talks about how they have these like belts around their bellies that protrude and expose just how big they've gotten, and the men are all skinny and have canes, but he feels like they're there to judge him. There are also a lot of times where he says things and it seems like his timeline is all skewed. Yeah, anyway, he's just very strange. That Moorish girl, her and her brother and some friends start following Raymond, and Rousseau gets in a spot of trouble when he eventually ends up taking a gun from Raymond and shooting one of the Arab men dead. Shooting him once, and then waiting and just thinking, and for no other reason than he felt hot because the sun was burning. He shoots him again 4 more times. And that's how he explains all his actions. It was hot. He won't take any responsibility, because if he does, that implies that the action was bad, or that there can be good actions even. That's the first half. Cut down a lot. There's more to it, of course. And the second half is him on trial, or him in jail, and then him on trial. And he's, starting to become a bit more emotional, still incredibly disaffected completely. Slowly but surely, as the trial goes on, he becomes more emotional and starts to realize, I'm guilty. And that people actually hate him. There's this really funny moment where I think it's when he meets his lawyer, or maybe just a guard, and he's really impressed with what the guy has to say. I think it's his lawyer. It's got to be his lawyer. Now I'm forgetting. I'm embarrassed. But he's not annoyed by this guy, as he gets annoyed by so many other people. And he wants to shake the guy's hand, but then he remembers he's a murderer. So he doesn't. And, in a way, it's interesting to think about these sort of social norms. And how one's morality can affect how you view these norms, I suppose, or lack of morality in this case. Anyway, everything in the case is looking bad for him. And all of the evidence, it's both sides are saying he's guilty. One is trying to give a cause so that he gets a lighter sentence. One is just trying to say he had no cause. He just did it because he's a madman. The prosecutors, of course. And it's like all the things they say are based on his behavior. He didn't seem to care at all when he was burying his mother. Which, I think is the most defensible one. Like, he could have just been in shock. He doesn't seem to be. But he could have just been in shock and, not been able to process his emotions, He had an affair with a woman the next day. Could have been burying his emotions into a woman, I suppose. Literally between her legs. And anyway, what's the other one? The letter one, yeah, that one's pretty bad. And the killing, because you were hot, because the sun was shining bright. Those ones are a little bit harder to defend. But I mean, the things that they bring up to discredit him, to show that he's dispassionate and cold and callous, reasonable, I suppose. We've seen it from his point of view, and the lawyer just points it out. And there's all kinds of witnesses from all the characters that we've met. And then, anyway, he starts to get more and more fearful, but he's very passive still. And then we get to the final chapter, and the chaplain comes to give him his last rites and all that, and have him accept God so that he will live in eternal life and this kind of thing. And he starts having these wild ideas. Of getting his hopes up, basically, that there must be some way I can get out. Anyway, it should be set up so there could be a 1 in 1,000 chance. That would make things even and fair, and to get out and whatever. But I wasn't being reasonable. And then he continues to come up with these insane ideas in his mind, which is kind of harsh to say, I suppose. Maybe that's the wrong terminology. But he just says some ludicrous things, and he continues to say, I wasn't being reasonable. Of course not. Anyway, he's having this argument and in his head, and he's starting to think, realize that he's never felt any remorse for any of his actions, and, doesn't want to accept God, doesn't want to, the chaplain thinks that there's going to be a lighter sentence, but he doesn't really want to admit anything or own up to anything or take any kind of responsibility, because that would imply that there was something wrong, and he's sort of indifferent, much like the world is indifferent to all actions. There are no good actions and there are no bad actions and these kind of things. Maybe I'm simplifying it a little bit too much. Though at the same time, he's at this point, he starts screaming and shouting at the chaplain in joy and in rage and sorrow. And I mean, he's just letting it all out, and he's really letting him know what he thinks. And he also, he comes to terms with this piece of his, of the indifference of the world and his own indifference, because it doesn't matter whether he dies now or died 10 years ago or at birth or was never born or dies when he's 70, because the past and he starts to accept that he has a past and a present and a future. Whereas, early on it seems like he's just living in the moment and passively observing everything, actively aware, hyper aware of what people are wearing and how they look, actively hyper aware of their appearance, but not their interiority in any way. Anyway, he ends up coming to peace with his indifference and hopes that everybody hates him when he goes out to be guillotined to death. And it's sort of like a how-to of how to live with the absurd. Don't be like this guy. Kind of a morality tale, I like to think. I mean, he's dealing with a lot of heavy questions, and they're worth exploring in a way, but I do sort of think, maybe it's just the way I'm reading it, and it's not the intention of the author, but this is what not to do. That's how I feel, because Merceau is pretty despicable, and thank you, goodbye.